Hey Matt, how are you?
Hey, I'm very good. Thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very curious about the company, the product. Obviously, a lot of people here who are watching us learned about this exciting product that you're building. But before we dive into the company and everything, I want to know about yourself. Give us a little bit of a background, what you do before, so people get to know you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Canada. I was born and raised on a farm, and I went to school for engineering, electrical engineer, and I did that as a career in Canada and the US. Then I did a career swap into investment banking, and that's what brought me to London. And during that time in investment banking, I worked at Morgan Stanley, and I worked on a product called supply chain finance, which helped try to deliver working capital to the supply chain to smaller businesses. And I said that was probably my inspiration for HyperJar, a better way to try and get capital into the supply chain. And also that combined with when I was growing up, I used to save up for things with the jar. So I used to save up for from I was a basketball backboard when I was a little kid, and that sort of idea of saving up in a jar combined with this idea of trying to allow consumers to help prepay for goods to help the supply chain came with that was, I guess, the basis for the idea for HyperJar. And I guess here we are. So after some years of banking and just thinking, the opportunity is now to try and go for this, I went for it, and eventually assembled a team. And now there's almost 40 of us, and we're getting ready to launch HyperJar to the UK market.
Wow. So what is a HyperJar? Tell us a bit about the vision here.
Yeah, so the original vision was basically crowdsource working capital. So the original vision was allowing people to pay in advance for shopping that they would otherwise already do with places where they shop at, and earn some kind of interest rate that would beat the bank rates. Because as we know, bank rates are very low and there's not much incentive to save. So with that idea, though, it evolved into a much broader consumer proposition as to help people save and plan, give people incentive to plan and save. So we built this app. So it's basically digital jam jar budgeting. So it's a very visual app to let me budget with jam jars. But then I also have some very powerful tools that no one else has. So for example, I can pay in advance to a shop, and right now it's around 5% per annum I can earn on my money. So, and the thing is, it automatically redeems using my payment card, which is a MasterCard. So there's no friction. You don't have to do anything special. There's no clicking codes or anything. It just works. Nothing extra to swipe. It's just my payment card. And then the jars are very powerful. They can be configured to my lifestyle. So I can share a jar, and I can share the jar with up to 100 people. I can make as many jars as I want. So for example, maybe I want to make a jar called groceries and share it with my wife and my kids. And that way anyone in my family can spend from that grocery jar. So it becomes a form of a controlled budget. And I can also spend directly from the jar. So a lot of apps have the idea of to containers, vaults,
Yeah,
pots,
well,
jars, but they're sort of it's like an endpoint. I have to put the money back into my wallet to be able to spend from the card. Whereas with HyperJar, I can link the jar to my card and spend directly from that jar. So so it's much more powerful. And I say fundamentally as well, the business model is like, we're not trying to be a bank. We're not trying to get a banking license. There's all sorts of complexity and costs associated with that. And with negative interest rates being like a very real possibility. To me, the whole current account model is broken. And so we're looking at a different way to do banking and savings involving the retail sector. So we feel it's a whole transformational view that we're trying to do. It's like, let's have the retail sector help people save, because the banking sector is sort of failing in that they're not offering any kind of incentive for people to save.
interesting approach and unique, I must say. Yeah, unique. So how are you working with all these retails? Like you have the whole department that needs to talk to the retails, and how does it work?
Yeah, so it definitely, every partner we have is an actual relationship where we have signed a contract and they come on board. So it's a fairly in-depth conversation. It's not just something where you can just onboard yourself. So we have to talk to someone, and it's typically very senior level, because this is a very different concept. It's trying to give, so from the retailer perspective, it's giving their customers an option to save for a purchase versus using credit for a purchase. That's another part of our philosophy, is we want to try and give people incentives to save, and not, because everyone has all sorts of access to credit and unsecured credit. And that's, it's useful in many cases, but can also be harmful in many cases. So we think it's very useful for the retailers to offer a savings option. So there's a whole CSR angle to this, giving people the tools to help save and plan so they don't go into debt, but still be able to consume, still be able to, live a fun and rewarding life and do things they want to do, but in a way where they don't get into financial trouble. So from the retail side, it's about getting them to buy into that vision. So our first partners, they all believe in that vision. They all want to be part of it. And because it's a new concept, we're very grateful that they understand this. And it's getting easier because as people see this concept and they see this actually makes sense, we're going to get more retailers on board. So yeah, so we have basically signed contracts with them. We have to do, there's no integration, there's no technical integration because everything is done through the card rails, the payment rails. So we've built technology so we can basically detect what store you're at to automatically deduct the money if it's prepaid to a particular store. And that means from the consumer perspective, there's nothing to learn. And for the retail perspective, the shop employee doesn't need to do anything. They just accept the card payment, which makes it very, very easy. Yes. So yeah, so they're about 20 right now. But we're in talks with dozens, and there's gonna be some big names coming on very soon. So it's gonna start to grow quite rapidly.
Wow, that's great. And did you see like a spike of interest during COVID? Because now I guess saving is a big thing.
Absolutely. So one thing I would say is before COVID, everyone always thought the concept, okay, it makes sense, but some needed to be more convinced as to whether their customers would want this or need this. Once COVID has happened, that's not even a question anymore. Now it's more because now it was a 10+ year economic expansion, and now we're entering recession territory, and obviously massive contraction, and now everything changes because the economy is a much more of a sensitive topic, and people are losing jobs, and people are trying to reduce their debt, and all of a sudden now it's versus trying to convince people that this concept makes sense. This obviously makes sense. Let's just figure out how we do it and how we sort of explain it. So the interest has definitely increased, both from the retailer perspective, but also from the consumer perspective. It's become this obviously makes sense. I'm surprised no one has done this before. And also as the Bank of England keeps lowering its rates, and you talk about negative interest rates, then it becomes even more interesting because now it's not just as a saver, can I get some value for my money if I have some savings? But also it's a question of, can current accounts continue to even be free when negative interest rates, the business model doesn't work anymore. So now there's a bigger systemic question here is, can current accounts in the UK be free? And we think we're addressing that. So timing wise, it's very great for us because we have this product which is designed for any economic environment, but it's very counter-cyclical. It works when times are tough. That's when people need to really be thoughtful. They need to be careful, and but they still need to live. They still need to spend.
So now you're focusing in the UK.
Yes, so it's a UK team. The infrastructure and launch is in the UK. However, we definitely plan to expand globally, and we have markets we're initially looking at, but we first want to get the UK launch done properly. The core technology. So we work with partners. But the core technology we've built ourselves. We actually have a fairly big technology team. We've built a lot of the core technology, and that can translate very well into other jurisdictions. But then we use local partners to deliver some of the other pieces of it. So we designed the model to be able to easily translate to other jurisdictions.
So you have some uniqueness in terms of the technology and how it's built because you build it yourself.
Yes, exactly. So there's some pieces that we use partners with, obviously, in terms of, for example, where the money is held. We use Modular, which is the e-money account holder, but the piece that we built. So we have effectively, it's a database, but there's a point when people check out to detect that it's at, for example, Shell. Yeah. It's called a devolved auth, where we detect that someone has made the payments in a Shell store, that they have the Shell money. It's growing real time. So there's a real time growth calculator that has to deduct it real time to give the right value so the customer can buy the exact amounts of goods they want to buy. And so we've built all of that. And then obviously from that, the ability to share, to have almost like dynamic joint bank accounts. So real time dynamic joint bank accounts where I can add and remove people, real time. So I could add you to a shared jar. I could remove you from the shared jar. You can spend from it. I can give permission, spend limits. So all this technology is quite unique that we've built, and that core is what can easily translate to other markets.
So until now, you're building this in the UK with a user base, like a beta, or like what was the phase?
Yeah. So we call it a private launch. So for the past year, about 1 year, we've been doing a private launch. And this is where, so the technology, the core technology was built, was working. This was trying to get the card rails working. And we just did some small experiments on marketing to find who our cohort users are. So who are the natural HyperJar users? So some experiments on that. So some very quiet paid acquisition, performance marketing. And we've grown to about close to 10,000 users for the past year through private launch. And the main thing we really wanted to do was, first of all, get feedback so we can iterate on the app, refine it, but also just ensure that, because we have big brands on the app, ensure that everything's working, because we're A, handling people's money, B, we also have a responsibility for the brands. We have to make sure it works, to make sure our customer service is top notch, just so that the brands don't have any kind of negative feedback from a bad experience. And that's, we got to the point now where we feel very confident that we're ready to scale it now. And so what's happening now, next phase, is we call it the public launch. That's going to happen actually October is the public launch. And then throughout the end of 2020 and into 2021, we're scaling the business. It's now time the business is being scaled.
Yeah, and for the bigger vision of the company, I'm just thinking out loud with you. Open banking, for example, is that a factor here?
Absolutely. So we definitely, so right now you have an e-money account with HyperJar effectively, but we are going to have an open banking integration so that the main point is you can include your other banking details so that the analytics become much more accurate, so we're building automation so that we can help advise on what jars to set up, what amounts to put into the jars, and we start to give people guidance on how to effectively create a budget. So effectively, when you're putting money in jars, you're creating a budget. So by having a better view of your spend, we can then determine how to set up those jars in that budget. And because we have our own card at the end of it, this becomes very functional end to end, whereas lots of open banking apps are just almost like the summary information. It sort of provides a summary information, whereas we're trying to provide that full end to end, but with that full power of this our jar technology as well. But that will come in early 2021.
I like your approach and how you started it. Of course, you were not looking, as you said, for a banking license, and you didn't want to be a bank, and you're trying to tackle it from a different angle. And I think, especially during COVID, and a lot of people develop trust with your brand because you're coming from their perspective, trying to help them in these times. And the players who are going to do that, I guess, users are going to trust and build it with the users, for the users, help them save better. How did you come up with the name again? Because it sounds catchy.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a roundabout way. We had an original name that was originally called Tractor, and there's a whole history as to why it was called Tractor, but it was spelt weird and it wasn't phonetic. And we thought we need to have something that's simpler, that's phonetic. And then, so as we were building the app, we had this idea of containers. And we thought, oh, these are like jars. And then it's literally just one of my co-founders. He said, he just came up with, hey, I have it, HyperJar, because hyper sort of implies that there's something more to it. There's more power, and our jars are very powerful. And then we checked, and the .com was available. So we thought, it's phonetic, it's very easy to pronounce, it's memorable, and it has some logic behind it. And we have the .com. So yeah, so we booked that, and that was I guess that was about 2 years ago, I think, that we sort of stuck on the name, and we were very happy with it because it is memorable, and because the app associates with the name, it's just fitting quite nicely.
Yeah, it's a perfect fit, and again, this is I heard about you, and I'm like a fintech geek, you can say, testing all these fintechs and banks and neobanks from all over the world, and I felt I just knew the name. I didn't know a lot of this story that you're telling me right now, and I think it's amazing, and the timing, as you said, it's relevant right now.
Yeah, no, timing is great for us.
Recent partnerships that you want to talk about, or stuff that was key in the last couple of months for you on your roadmap?
Yeah. So first of all, so I'm not sure if you can see, but this is
Wow.
uh,
Okay.
this is the this is like the new card. Those are new cards. So we also had this TV the history. So this is the original cards. Then this is the new design. I'm not sure if you can see. There's a little bit of a wave effect.
I see. I see it. It looks clean. Looks nice.
And
Uh,
because
on the back you have your details. That's why, like.
this is a blank, so I can show you the back.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a blank. But that wave effect. So in the app, when you open up a jar, when you set a goal, the balance of the jar was reflected in a wave, and the wave it oscillates. So in the app, there's like little oscillating waves. So we have this idea of a wave, and the idea is we want to feel, first of all, give you a sense of what your balance is, so you have a sense of a goal, but also it's trying to create calm. So the whole point with HyperJar, we're trying to create people to give them calmness around their money. So when they start to budget and put things into jars, they get control, and ultimately we want them to feel calm, so they feel happier. That's the whole point. And then we have another big one is the kids card. So
Oh,
this is
wow.
our
It's the
kids
first time
card.
I see it. Wow. Very nice design.
Yeah, and then that's the back again, nice and clean. And so this card, so the way the card works is it connects to the parent app, and the parent can set up unlimited jars for their kids. And they can set up, for example, a spending jar. They can set up a university savings jar. The parent can then link this card to whatever jar they want in the parent's app, and that kid can now spend, but spend to a budget. So I could give my kid I could even give them for example, a Xbox jar with 10 pounds and link it, and it can only spend up to 10 pounds. So I can start to control how much they can spend. And this will be the only free kids cards, spending card in the UK, which is we're quite excited about this. And soon there will be also a child app as well. So it's optional. So some parents don't want their children to have an iPhone with an app, especially younger children, because this can go from age 6 up to 18. However, in the new year, there will be the option to also have a child app. And in the child app, the kid can then create their own jars, set their own budgets. They can even share a jar with friends if they want to. For example, imagine some friends are going to a theme park, and parents might budget together, and they can spend from a single jar. So there's all sorts of things they can start to learn about how to budget. And so we're quite excited about Kids Card. It's quite, even though there are kids apps and kids cards, no one's done it the way that we've done it. So we're excited. We're expecting it to be very, very big demand. So
yeah, very smart. So what is the feedback from those who are using?
Yeah. So as I said, we have about 10,000 users, and I would say the interesting thing is a lot of fintech apps in the UK, they sort of err towards London, millennial, maybe Gen Z, and it's a very the demographics are sort of very similar, whereas our demographics are very, very diverse, and not by even trying. We just put out some generic messaging around what we are, and also because my point, we're not trying to become a bank. We didn't try to get a bank license. We're not putting out a message that's very bold, as in abandon your bank and switch to HyperJar. We're saying, hey, if you're a big bank customer, keep your big bank, keep your accounts, but use HyperJar to help turbocharge your day-to-day spending. So use it as an additional tool. And because it's pitched as an additional tool, then it's easier for people to make that leap. And because we have a business model that works off of that, we don't need people to put their entire deposits into it like some challenger banks. They need people to have their core banking to make it work, because they have the banking license. They need billions and billions of deposits to make the economics work. We don't need that. So because of that, we've been able to attract atypical fintech users. So we're very diverse by age. The range from 20 up to 65 is quite evenly spread. So we have a lot of users in their 40s and 50s, lots of users in their 20s and 30s.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, and we skew female, which is again atypical. So we skew slightly female. Our age, our income demographics, again, it's very diverse. We have people who from poor to wealthy. It's because we are helping people to save and budget, but also for people who have savings and income, they're thinking, well, this is actually a very useful tool for my family, and it's a very useful tool where I can get more return. Who are actually looking for the best value. So we're very happy in terms of, and we're across every postcode in the country. So our heat map of users right now reflects the population of the country. Whereas typical challenger banks, it's very heavily heat map over London.
Yes.
So yeah, so it's a very broad user base, and I would say probably the biggest cohort of users initially will be young families. So
Yeah.
people who just have some young children in school, and university students. So students who are now having to budget for the first time, really, who have to manage various payments and expenses and bills. And also who have to do shared accommodations and shared bills. Those are probably the two biggest initial populations that we'll be targeting.
Amazing. So people are watching us right now, and we have all kinds of banks and fintechs and other players here. Of course, you said before retails can partner with you. I'm just thinking out loud. What kind of partners are you looking for? How can people partner with you? Because it sounds great. So definitely retails, right?
Yeah, it's a very good point, because like there's obvious examples of different types of retailers that can work with us, whether it's supermarkets, e-commerce, just
Yeah.
electronics, clothing, any shop like that. But the things which people might not be as aware are, we also work with utilities. So if you're a utility trying to helping someone manage their payments, that we're working with utilities. Charities, if you're a charity, we're trying to incorporate charitable giving as part of my regular budget. So I'm going to allocate my money to jars, but part of that's going to include some regular giving to a certain charity. And that way we can help charities raise their profile and just become more of a regular process. Because right now, charities often struggle with, they have to sort of canvas for donations, especially with COVID, it's harder because people aren't on the streets. And so we have a real solution for that as well. And so utilities, charities, also experiences, so travel, any kind of services, anything that's aspirational that you have to save up for.
Yeah.
Also,
did you raise money? Like, where is the stage of raising money? Or
Yep. So we've done two, I'd call them sort of seed A rounds. And it's about 10 million pounds that we've raised. So we've just closed the rounds in October, that for those funds were used for launch, and that's to get us to a certain level of scale of users. And yeah, but we have plenty of funds to execute on the plan. As I mentioned, we have close to 40 employees. Most are, like, it's very dev heavy. We've built a lot of technology ourselves. And obviously during the public phase now, we're spending on marketing. So all the marketing, kicked off in the autumn, and that's going to sort of carry through to the new year.
You definitely got me curious about the company and what's coming next. Thank you very much for again the interview, the time, and I'm a fan of what you do. I mean, I love the focus. I understand where the company goes, and I'm sure lots of people here are very excited about what you're building there. And maybe we're gonna do another interview later, because I want to see next year where is it going. It's very interesting. How can people contact you, follow you, get the updates about the product?
Yeah, so obviously we have a website, www.hyperjar.com. We also have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you it's HyperJar, we have the tag HyperJar, and I think HyperJar app for Twitter. But basically, through those channels, you can follow us. Also on the website, you can reach out to us. We have live customer support, but any questions. And also I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Matt Megens on LinkedIn, so I'm always very open to connections. So yeah, I love any feedback, comments, thoughts. I'm very open to it all.
Great. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.